Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, YouTube's post-traumatic parenting expert. Have you ever asked yourself, will my damage my children? Have you ever felt, I am so depleted from recent traumas in my life? I don't have any psychological resources left for my kids. How is that going to affect them? Have you ever thought, how can I give my kids a normal childhood? I didn't experience one. Welcome. I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, and I'm a fellow post-traumatic parent. If you like this kind of content, please hit subscribe below so that you never miss another video. Today we're going to talk about cycle breakers, the challenges that cycle breakers face, and why cycle breaking and post-traumatic parenting often go hand in hand. So when we say that someone's a cycle breaker, what we are talking about is somebody who wants to parent differently than the way that they were parented and does not want to transmit certain types of abusive practices down to their children, or does not want to transmit a legacy of unhealthy coping down to their children because they know what it was like in their own childhood and they want to do it differently. Very often, let's explode some myths about cycle breakers, about estrangement, about mother wounds and father wounds, and how they work. First of all, very often when people talk about cycle breaking and they talk about estrangement, what they really mean is a renegotiation of boundaries. So I've heard from a lot of post-traumatic parents about how there was a lot of entanglement or enmeshment in their family of origin, that their family of origin doesn't understand a concept like, when am I available? When am I not available? What are the things I'm available to get involved in? Like, how much can I hear about my parents' marriage? Or how much can I hear about my sister's struggles before it starts to deplete me and stops me from parenting in accordance with my values? Do I allow family members to simply drop in whenever they want, even at a time that I really need to focus on my family? Am I expected to drop everything and run when a sibling is in crisis, a parent is in crisis, and maybe there's a crisis every single week because that's just how the family of origin handles things, and maybe it's a crisis of their own making, or maybe it's a crisis that I can't even actually be helpful with. And then they're being told that they're estranging, that they're from a selfish generation, that their parent is so hurt, and how can you estrange, and blood is thicker than water, although I'm not sure how the relative viscosity of liquids has anything to do with relationships, but whatever. And I very often point out that changing the boundaries of a relationship and estrangement are two very different things. One child saying to a parent, I'm going to be shutting my phone between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. because I need to focus on my kids, and I realize that that means you also will not be able to reach me. That's what I need to do for my family. Oh, you're estranging now? That's not estrangement, right? That's a boundary. In fact, boundaries are what prevent estrangement, because if everybody can honor that from 4 through 8 p.m. I am not available, and no one's going to call, and no one's going to have a crisis that really isn't a crisis that I must drop everything and handle this instant, then I'm not going to estrange because everybody's respecting my boundaries, right? And very often in a family of origin where you're expected to be on call 24/7, just that act of shutting the phone from 4 through 8 p.m. feels like a gigantic change. This is huge. How can you do this? But really, it's 4 through 8 p.m. There are people whose families naturally respect their boundaries, and if they say, try really hard not to call me between 4 and 8 p.m., their family won't call them between 4 and 8 p.m. And the one time the phone does ring, they know it's actually an emergency, and they'll pick up because someone had a heart attack, something major happened, because otherwise the phone doesn't ring, right? That's what boundaries are. Boundaries are simply, this is how close I can get to you. Boundaries are not, this is how far I need to stay from you. That's not what boundaries are for. Boundaries are about, this is how close it feels safe, right? You can come visit. I need you to call first, right? You can call me, but not between 4 and 8 p.m. unless it's absolutely a real emergency. I'm never available when I'm, at work or with my kids or whatever that is. These are the times that I'm available. These are the times that I am not available. Those are boundaries. That is not estrangement. A lot of times when I hear about estrangement, or when I'm teaching a parenting class or I'm talking to parents, they talk about how angry their parents are about estrangement, and what they're actually talking about is boundary renegotiation. So we have to be very careful to really define our terms. Boundary renegotiation is what adults do. We negotiate our boundaries all the time, right? If I go walking with my friend early in the morning and my friend calls me and says, listen, my baby is really difficult lately. She's just not sleeping through the night. I cannot wake up at the crack of dawn to go walking because I need sleep. That's a boundary renegotiation. It used to be convenient for us to go walking early in the morning until this baby became colicky and difficult. And now it doesn't work anymore. We can maybe go walking at 8 p.m. instead, or maybe we're going to not go walking until her baby's a little older, right? That's a boundary renegotiation. She is not telling me, I don't want to be your friend anymore. I hate you. She's just saying, yeah, I used to love our 6 a.m. walks. Can't do them anymore, right? So let's just be very careful. When a child does go gray rock, where they actually are estranged from a parent, it's usually because boundary renegotiations were not honored for a very long time. They asked, they spoke, they requested, they discussed, they mentioned their new boundaries, they explained them, and they weren't heard, right? Or someone goes gray rock when there's been irreparable harm done by the family of origin, and the family of origin will not commit to not doing that harm. For example, someone who was abused by a step parent who will not have her children around that person because she's too on edge, worrying that the step parent will abuse her children. She doesn't want her children to become comfortable with someone who abused her. So she's just not going to have her children around that person. Maybe she tried once. It was just too intolerably panicky. She was just too scared. She can't do it. Maybe she tried, she set a certain boundary and the boundary wasn't respected. So now she's not going to do it. No one goes gray rock with a family of origin, at least no one I've ever met, goes gray rock on a whim. This is not something that people wake up one morning and say I think I'll dye my hair. Yeah, I don't love the color of my kitchen. I think I'll paint it blue. And I think I'll estrange from my family of origin. No one ever does that. Hopefully, this is always my goal whenever I'm dealing with a family with a cycle breaker. My goal is always, can we repair the relationship? There was a massive rupture. Can we repair? Right? If that's what the patient wants, if that's what the mom I'm dealing with, the dad I'm dealing with, meaning the people who are in my office being post-traumatic parents, if that's what they want, we can work on repair. I always want repair. All therapists at our core want all of the relationships in our patients' lives to be healthy, right? That's the goal of therapy, right? If we can't repair a relationship, that's a failed relationship. We don't want that. Our goal is healthy relationships. Can every relationship be repaired? No, right? Can every person learn to understand boundaries? Can every form of harm and damage be repaired and corrected? No. There are some things like abuse that are too egregious and I cannot repair them. The patient does not want to repair them. The patient does not feel that that's valuable. It's not reparable, right? If that's the case, that's a different story. But when somebody renegotiates boundaries with their family of origin, that is not estrangement. And I would say in my parenting classes, in the members of the post-traumatic parenting community that I speak to, a lot of times the parents are, the family of origin is misinterpreting boundary renegotiation for estrangement. Not the same thing. Now, if somebody is estranged or if there's a boundary renegotiation, there are a lot of processes that we go through that people do not realize. People see the child who chooses to lower their contact with their family of origin as making a choice. They don't always see that it's inevitable, that it's not possible. I can either parent my vulnerable children in accordance with my values or continue to engage in my family of origin in exactly the way they prefer. I cannot do both. If I come home from my family of origin extremely stressed out, I will not be able to focus on my kids. If I come home from my family of origin and then I get a migraine for 3 hours, I'm not nursing my baby. I'm not spending time playing with my kids. I can't show up at work the way I need to the next day, and that's going to affect my family's survival, right? Very often, these things are not a choice. And very often that lack of choice has been communicated to the family of origin. And sometimes that is the way that we reconcile. Because very often I've said to grandparents, do you want healthy grandchildren? You seem to love her children, you want to be around her children, you think her children are adorable and delicious and you'd like to spend time with them. Do you want them to be healthy and happy and thrive? Okay, when your daughter comes home from your house and she has a migraine, she can't care for them. Now, if she would come to your house and those 5 hot button topics that she does not want to discuss with you, if you can promise not to raise them. So you're not talking about her lifestyle choices and you're not talking about some changes she made in her life or the things you disagree with or why you think she's a bad person or whatever your gripes with your daughter are. And instead you're talking about happy, friendly topics. You're talking about family news. She's showing you photos of the kids. You're having a nice conversation and you're avoiding the fact that the two of you are a different religion now. You're avoiding it. You're not discussing it at all. She can come because then she's going to come home in a great mood and she'll be able to care for her kids and everything will be happy. If she comes to you and you're going to berate her, she'll come home with a migraine and that doesn't serve the children. Don't you want those children to have a healthy childhood? Very often grandparents can then understand that, right? So yeah, we're not going to litigate the disputes of the past every time we see you. We are not going to keep telling you about the mistakes you made when you were 16 and what a lazy, horrible person you are because you were 16 then. We're going to focus on a good, positive relationship. That doesn't mean leaving the past in the past, as some parents say. That means we can maybe one day have that conversation in family therapy with someone mediating it in a safe and secure fashion where we each hear each other out and we really repair that and we come to a new understanding where our adult child understands us, we understand our adult child. All of that can happen. But it shouldn't be happening every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and every time you talk to her and every time you ask her a simple question like, is your daughter's favorite color pink or blue, right? That's not the time to start having that debate again, right? That debate was long ago, settled. Your adult daughter made the choices she made. We're not going to keep having that conversation because then she can't parent in accordance with her values. At some point, if that's an important conversation to have, sure, that's what family therapy is for. That's what sometimes mediation is for. If both of you truly want to work on that relationship and there's some unfinished business from the past, so rather than every time dropping comment and comment and comment, yeah, well, Sarah, you've always been lazy. Well, Sarah, you've always been incompetent. Well, it doesn't make sense. You always mess up, right? That kind of comment, there's something that you want to talk about. Invest a couple of hours and some serious discomfort, have that conversation, see each other's perspectives, do that responsibility taking, apologizing on both sides. Now that I understand what I understand, I would handle it differently. I feel validated and understood. You feel validated and understood. Now we haven't put the past in the past. We've reinterpreted and reprocessed the past and we understand it differently now. Now we can indeed move on. We can move forward with, right? That's how to have that conversation. Dropping critical comments every time is going to make that adult daughter not be the kind of parent she wants to be, right? It's going to make that adult son not pick up the phone every time you call. So it's just simply unwise. But that's something that many cycle breakers go through, is that sensation of people feel like it was their choice when really it was inevitable given the kind of parenting they're trying to do now, the needs of their children, the needs of their current life. Very often, we don't know what goes on in someone's family of origin, right? So very often it's like, oh, her parents are the nicest people, perhaps to you. Her stepdad, salt of the earth, nicest guy, but has a massive temper and when he's drunk beats her within an inch of her life. You didn't know that. She hid that. She felt shame. You never knew because you see him on a Tuesday afternoon and he seems like the nicest guy in the world. He's the nicest guy in the world, at work. He's the nicest guy in the world when you see him around the neighborhood. You don't necessarily know what went on behind closed doors. So many post-traumatic parents who are renegotiating boundaries with their family of origin feel so shamed and blamed and judged because people look at it as a choice when very often it isn't. If someone's in such a state of panic when she's around that abusive stepfather who beat her within an inch of her life, and then she comes home and she's absolutely dissociated, checked out, cannot parent, cannot muster up the energy to go to work for a week, that's not really a choice, right? So very often as a psychologist, I see those backstories that the world doesn't know. Very often I see those attempts at renegotiating boundaries, at having that conversation, but the world has not seen them. Another struggle of a cycle breaker is we can sometimes miss that person and that relationship, like the aspects of it that were good, right? It's very difficult to mourn the living, right? Mourning the dead is a natural process. We mourn, we go through it every so often as we're reminded of our loss. It becomes, it opens up again in our brain. But on the whole, there's a very predictable process for mourning the dead. Mourning the living is so much harder, right? Mourning a certain interaction pattern that used to feel cozy but actually wasn't great, and now you're not going to be involved in that interaction pattern, that can feel stressful. It can feel hard. It's a stress that cycle breakers go through that other people don't see. But I have seen people come through that mourning period and come through that healing period and come to the place where they do want contact with their family members within boundaries, or they want contact with certain members of the family but not others. And slowly but surely, as they are less afraid and they own their adult strength and they understand that perhaps stepdad, who was so scary when I was 11, is not nearly as big and physically imposing as he is now, as he is to me now as an adult. He's not all that scary anymore, and now I can have that conversation. Now I can be in his presence for a short period of time, right? In order to be in the presence of my mom, in order to be around my siblings, I can slowly but surely try it. Because another thing about boundaries that people don't realize is we're constantly renegotiating them, right? So sometimes we set a boundary with someone and we're pretty strict about it for a while, and then we see it's honored and we're like, I'm going to give it another chance. So I'm going to take my phone off silent from 4 to 8 to see if people at this point have really understood that I meant it when I said from 4 to 8 I'm not available, and I'll see what happens. Or, I'm actually available now. From 5 till 7 I'm not available, but from 4 to 5 I'm available, and from 7 to 8 I'm available because my kids' schedules have changed, my life has changed. I'm renegotiating that boundary. This person now feels safe to me because they've been respecting my boundary. I'm going to let them in a little bit more, right? We're constantly renegotiating boundaries, changing boundaries, working with boundaries. I will say to an estranged parent who doesn't want the estrangement that if you respect boundaries and every so often signal your willingness to engage in a repair process, it is so much more likely to be successful, right? So every so often you reach out to that person's therapist and you say, whenever they're ready, I would love to sit down. I know they have some uncomfortable things to say to me. I'm ready to hear them, and I want to help fix the relationship. I might have some uncomfortable things to say to them, and I want to fix it, but in service of fixing it, in service of renegotiating a new adult relationship that is so much better and richer and filled with nuance. I'm ready to do that. Very often, you'd be surprised at how receptive adult children are, especially if they were reached out to through proper channels, especially if there's been time, there's been healing, they've developed new emotion regulation skills, they feel more confident, they feel calmer and more centered in self, and now they're ready to enter into that process because it feels safe to do so. Because humans are wired to remain attached to our families of origin. Our families of origin are the first thing that our body and our brain encode as safe and familiar and comforting. It's why we, want to eat mom's chicken soup, or why we crave mac and cheese when we're feeling sick, because what's familiar feels comforting. What's familiar feels good. So if we can go back to what's familiar, if we can go back to what's natural, We do, and we try to. And I have seen so many incredibly beautiful and moving reconciliations when the healing period was respected, when boundaries were accepted, when it was okay to first allow someone to heal, when everybody agrees that the needs of the smallest children in the situation are what is paramount, that the needs of the grandchildren, because it's usually the grandchildren, trump old fights, old disagreements, different ways of interacting, because what we really want are emotionally healthy grandchildren. And I will usually say that family of origin and parents can both agree about that. Right? We don't always agree on the method to getting there, but we can all agree that the grandchildren's needs are what is paramount here, and that the parenting relationship, the attachment relationship must be respected and must be enhanced and nurtured and grown. So if you're a cycle breaker, I see you. I hear you. I get it. I know how difficult and nuanced it can be. And know that if you're cycle breaking in order to provide your kids with a very different childhood than the one you had, then you are doing something very precious and very worth it. And, you know, they talk about giving birth as labor as though that's the hardest thing. Raising the kids, that's the real labor. And every day that you parent in accordance with your values, as hard as trauma makes it to feel this way, sit down, celebrate yourself, celebrate that you're raising your children to be healthy, to be attached, to have a good normative childhood. That's so much more of an achievement than we will ever realize. If you like this content, please save, subscribe, share. Please check us out. The post-traumatic parenting community hangs out on Instagram, where we also have a subscription so you can ask me specific questions about your parenting. If you want to hear long-form interviews and long-form classes on post-traumatic parenting, look for the Post-Traumatic Parenting Podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. The book will be out in a year, the Post-Traumatic Parenting book. And if you want to be part of the book, if you want to have your questions and your observations and your life experiences included in the questions we make sure to answer in the book, please join our post-traumatic parenting community on Instagram. I cannot wait to hear what you think of this video, so please comment below.